Good morning, students. The next topic in disaster management subject is nuclear power plant emergency. This is a man-made emergency. The nuclear power plants, you would have studied in chemistry in your 12th standard about fusion and fission. They are methods in which you can create energy when chemicals are reacted. So that is the work of the nuclear power plants. They are mainly used to create energy or power. So this energy is used for electricity and other uses. So that is the reason if you use hydropower or other methods of power generation, it takes a lot of effort, whereas the nuclear power plants produce a lot of power at a very cheap rate. So India has 22 nuclear reactors and there are 8 nuclear power plants. Of these, 2 of these power plants are in Tamil Nadu. So one of the power plants is in Kudankulam. You would have heard about the protest that people are doing not to allow the Kudankulam nuclear power plant to function. The next one is in Kalpakkam. This Kalpakkam is only around 140 kilometers from Vellore and it is managed by the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited. In fact, all the nuclear power plants are managed by the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited. So there are a lot of risks in the nuclear power plants, and that too serious risks which can cause effect even for hundreds of years. So that is why these nuclear power plants are very important in disaster management, and a lot of care has to be taken to prevent disasters or accidents. There are 2 examples of previous nuclear power plant accidents. The first one was in Chernobyl in Russia. Here there was a blast, that is an explosion, which caused the accident. And the next one was Fukushima disaster in Japan. This was caused by a tsunami. Just like Kudankulam, this Fukushima nuclear reactor was also present near the sea. So when the tsunami came, all the sea water entered the nuclear power plant and it prevented people from going inside, and the regular function stopped. The power supply was not there. So that is the explanation of how this accidents can occur. When there is no power supply, that is no electricity or no backup power supply, the core, which is the center of the nuclear reactor, which actually does all the power generation, it cannot be cooled down. Usually when the reaction happens, it becomes hot. So there should be always water which is cooled, and that is done by the electricity. So when there was no electricity, there is blast or explosion. So in Fukushima, they prevented the explosion because some people, they went inside and restarted the power supply before it could explode. But in Chernobyl, the explosion happened, which led to disaster. So let's see what are the preparations that people have to make for such disasters. The most important thing is safety and quality assurance in the selection of material. So when you build the buildings or when you make the nuclear reactor, you should have best material, best design and best layout of the plant and the site selection. These are very important because that will help in preventing various accidents. You should not build a nuclear reactor in areas where there are likely to be earthquakes. So you should build in areas where no earthquakes can happen. That is why in Tamil Nadu there are 2 nuclear power plants, because Tamil Nadu is not in the earthquake belt in India. And then the emergency plan and preparedness for the disaster management should be available for the local population also. The people who are working in the nuclear reactor, they have a separate plan, and the local population who live in the nearby area, they have a separate plan. The people inside are the responsibility of the site manager, whereas the people living around the nuclear power plant, they are the responsibility of the district collector and the other district officials. So the district administration, non-governmental organizations and even civil society actors, that means the normal Ur Talevars and people like that, and they are all trained in how to respond to the nuclear accident. So they will know what will happen when a nuclear accident happens, how the information will be passed on to the important people in the district, and how they convey the message to all the residents of the village, and this will help the people to get evacuated from that particular area. So what is the problem that can occur when there is a disaster, nuclear power disaster? The first thing is the spread of the radioactive material. So as we said, as you studied in chemistry, there are radioactive materials which can lead to radioactivity, which is a very serious risk which can cause cancer to the people affected, not only immediately but even 50 years afterwards. They can be affected by cancer, or the generations they can be affected by cancer, because there is genetic change in the genes of the people who are affected by radioactive material. So how does this radioactive material spread when there is a nuclear accident? It contaminates the groundwater, or it can spread by wind to nearby areas, and if it is near the sea, it can spread by seawater also. For example, in the example which I gave, Chernobyl, by wind it spread to the nearby countries also. So that is the seriousness of the risk. So up to 10 kilometers people have to be evacuated if there is a nuclear explosion, and the risk of this radioactive material is even up to 50 kilometers. It is based on the wind blowing and all the other factors. So the safety aspect in the nuclear power plant is in the site, that is the place where it is located. Siting means the area, the place where it is located. Then in the design of the buildings and the other areas. Then the operation, how they conduct the nuclear power, so that the regular functioning. So in that there should be safety, and there should be quality assurance, that is everything should be of good quality. If there is poor quality, then the risk of accidents become more. So these are the 4 important aspects of safety aspects when nuclear plants are created, when they are set up. So the emergency situation is categorized as follows. There are 5 ways of emergency. One is emergency standby, that is when there is an abnormal condition inside the nuclear power plant, that is when there is wrong method or some accident or small accident has occurred, they put the whole place on standby. So the plant is responsible to control this emergency situation and overcome the emergency situation. The next thing is the personal emergency. Personal means the people involved. So when the people who are working in the nuclear power plant have a risk, that is either they had an accident or they were involved in some exposure to radioactive material. So any abnormal situation, the people are protected. So immediately there is a siren which tells that there is a personal emergency, and all the people are told to evacuate, and whoever is affected, they are evacuated and sent to the hospital. Then the plant emergency, this means the whole plant, that the whole nuclear plant, there is an emergency situation. So any abnormality, any accident, any small explosion, any leakage in radioactive material, whatever it is, even if it's the smallest emergency, then the whole plant comes to a shutdown, and till the emergency situation is overcome, because it's so serious. This nuclear power plant, it's not like one person will die or 2% will die or small accident will happen. A small accident can lead to a major accident. So that is why they take utmost precaution. Then the next emergency is a site emergency. This means that the whole site is there is a major breach of radioactive material, and there is a boundary around the nuclear power plant. It could be even up to 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers surrounding radius. So in this exclusion zone, all the people are removed when there is a site emergency. Then finally comes the offsite emergency. Till the first 4, everything is related to the nuclear power plant. So outsiders may not be affected much, but in the offsite emergency, it means then outside people who were living outside the nuclear power plant, they are also at risk. So immediately up to 16 kilometer radius, there's people are evacuated, information is provided, and the district officials under the district collector or the commissioner, they take precautions and save the people by evacuating them, and all the other aspects they put into action. Even now, due to coronavirus, the district collector is the one who is in charge of the Vellore district, and as per the organizational structure which we studied in the first class of disaster management, the district collector is in charge for the district. So whichever district the nuclear power plant is located, the district collector will ensure that all the people are safe. So what are the steps that they take when there is an off-site emergency? So how do they prevent risk to the public who stay near the power plant? First way is declaration of emergency. So when they declare emergency because of any radioactive material leakage, immediately the public are organized and the announcements are made through the roads by loudspeakers, so that everybody in the area knows that there is a emergency situation. Then countermeasures, that is providing shelter for the people and emergency treatment. Prophylaxis means preventive treatment. Then evacuation, removing the people from the affected area to a safe area and providing food for the public who have been evacuated from that area. All this is done, and then if anybody is injured or exposed to radioactive material, they are given medical care. Either they are taken to the hospitals or doctors come to the particular area and provide first aid to them, and the police are informed, the media is informed, so that information is provided to everybody. And finally, the medical care for the affected public. The first medical care was for the injured people, and then it is for all the others who are not acutely ill, but even as a precaution, everybody undergoes a health checkup. So that is a next one. After this, the police and the district administration ensure that nobody enters the affected area, because even this radioactive material is not like something which will come and then go off. It is like gas, you cannot smell it, but if it is in the air and if you go to the area, then you will be affected. You won't even know that you are affected. So the people are prevented from entering that area. There is something called as a dosimeter, which measures the radioactivity in the particular area. So they use that to check whether there is radioactive material in whichever area. So those areas are out of bounds for the people. Then communication is maintained between the emergency control center, police headquarters, media and other public departments, because all the departments work together to overcome the emergency situation. Then once all the radioactive material is not present, and if there is a all clear signal given, then the public is allowed to return back to their places. The next step is taking care of the property of those who have been evacuated. In case some areas are still affected, then the property of those people are taken care of. They ensure that there is still protection to the protection to people who go nearby, and ensure that the houses are not affected, and if the houses are not affected, their property is brought to the people. And finally, if there is no emergency, the termination of emergency is done. Food control in the contaminated areas is done, that is, no food is allowed to be eaten, because just like coronavirus, will you go and stand near an affected person and eat food? You won't, because if the virus can be in the air. Same way, the radioactive material can be in the air. So people do not eat in the contaminated areas. They provide assistance in environmental monitoring, and then there is radioactive decontamination. The Chernobyl disaster, you know what the decontamination method was? They created a huge cement block which covered the entire area. That is, through helicopters they came and poured cement on the whole nuclear reactor, so that the whole place was covered, because for many kilometers, because of the explosion, the radioactive material was spread. Okay, so that is the prevention of safety aspects of nuclear power plants. The next topic that we are going to cover is hazardous material. Hazardous material means those that are risky when you handle it. Usually chemicals are hazardous material. Even the radioactive materials are chemicals, they are also hazardous. But because we studied radioactive material separately, we'll read about the other hazardous material. What are the other hazardous material? Acids, then caustic substances, disinfectants, glues, heavy metals including mercury, lead, cadmium, aluminium, paint, pesticides, petroleum products and solvents. Examples are chlorine, ammonia, LPG, kerosene, petrol, sulfur. Examples. These are examples. So we all know what are the usual hazardous materials in our house, we keep them out of reach of children. If any of you have children in your house or in your relatives house, will you keep paint and kerosene where the children can touch it? No, we'll keep it separately because they are risky. The child can drink it, or if something happens, it can be dangerous. So what are the exposures, what are the effects when we are exposed to hazardous material? So we have seen the list of hazardous material which can cause serious risk for us. So what are the side effects which can happen? The side effects are, how can you be exposed? Either you drink it without knowing it, or even on purpose. Some people drink without knowing, you may drink, or if a child is there, then it may spill the chemical, or even when you are carrying the chemical, you may spill it. So these kinds of things can happen, and it can fall on the skin or get into the eyes. So these are the various ways in which we can be affected. So when we get affected, the signs and symptoms or the side effects that can happen are symptoms of poisoning, that is nausea and vomiting. Nausea means vomiting sensation, and then people can vomit also. Then there can be headache, skin rashes, and chemical burns. In long term effects, I was talking about nuclear power plants. Long term effect is birth defects, that is the next generation, because the genetic changes are there in the human body. Next generation, when the child is born, the child can be born with defects. Then there can also be disorders of the lung, kidney, liver, nervous system disorder. If it has affected too many parts of the body, then the person can have multi-organ failure, cardiac arrest, and even die. So these things should be prevented. So how can we prevent them? Is we have to identify the areas which are at risk. Inside the house, we have to keep them in safe place, that we have studied in the first part of this chapter. But in an industrial area, how are the ways in which they can prevent such accidents? They have to find an area that is at risk. In recent example is the Visakhapatnam gas leak. Okay, before this Visakhapatnam gas leak, the most famous and actually infamous, we can say, most problematic gas leak which caused deaths of hundreds of people is the Bhopal gas tragedy. We'll see that later. So how to prevent that? Before that, we'll see the sources of this material. Where are these hazardous materials produced? We need all these hazardous materials for various production of various other materials. For example, if you are creating a paint, then you need to add so many additives and so many chemicals. If you are creating a LPG for use in the house, then you have to create it. So there are so many ways, chemicals that are handled day in and day out by many big companies. So these manufacturing companies and formulation installations, during which the chemicals can be used, so they have to be properly used. Then the maintenance of the remaining chemicals has to be done properly, and the disposal has to be done properly. So other than this, whenever people are handling the chemicals or storing the chemicals, they have to store it properly. Even in the Visakhapatnam gas leak, what happened was, the gas was stored in a big container, but after so many days, because of coronavirus, people were not working in the company. When they went back, they found that somebody had opened the gas this thing. So storage was a problem there. So from the storage go down, the gas started leaking. So storage of chemicals, hazardous chemicals, is very important. The next thing is transportation by rail, road, air, or through water, and even pipelines. Petrol and all is transported through pipelines, and it is also transported through road, rail, or air. Or water means not through water, it's through ships. So these are the ways in which we transport material, and if there is any spill or any leak, then it can cause serious hazards. So what are the causative factors leading to hazardous materials? Like usually there are chemical disasters like fire, explosion, then a toxic release or poisoning, or a combination of all these four. So whenever there is an explosion, there is fire. Whenever there is a fire, there can be explosion. When there is fire and explosion, it can release toxic substances and it can lead to poisoning. So what are the how does this chemical hazards occur? First thing is a technical error. So whenever there is a design defect, when the design of the material, design of the storage container, or design of the building, if there is a defect, or if there is fatigue means because of keeping on using the same thing it gets broken, or if there is failure in the metal, that is if there is a reinforcing steel which is tightened by screws, over a period of time it can get rusted and then it can fall off. So these are technical errors. Then human errors, that is when a human being is handling these chemicals, they can cause accidents because they neglect the safety, that is they do not take care, they are very careless, that leads to safety issues. And if there is a proper procedure, they do not do the procedure, they try to find a easy way out, that can lead to human errors. Then if there is lack of information, for example, if they are releasing the gas in a particular area, the people who are working in that area are not informed properly, so they still stand near the area and they can be exposed to gas. So these are without information. Then organizational error, that is as a whole organization there is poor communication with the public and they do not take proper protection. Like for coronavirus, we know that we have personal protective equipment or PPE that has to be worn to prevent coronavirus from affecting us. Same way, people who work in hazardous areas also, they wear these suits which is very similar to personal protective equipment used in coronavirus. So it will prevent people from having the chemicals spilled on them. So they do not know how to wear it, they do not have enough protective equipment. So all these are organizational errors. Then it can also be caused by natural calamities. I recently told how the Fukushima nuclear reactor, when there was a tsunami, the nuclear reactor had an accident. So that means it is caused because of natural calamity. So for example, when a huge building which has got petrol has earthquake and the building collapses, then all the petrol will leak and get into the nearby villages and houses. So same way, India, because of the cyclones and because of earthquakes, these kinds of risks is more. Then terrorist attacks. Terrorist attack, we have already studied about terrorist attacks. Terrorists usually target these kind of places where, if for example they bomb a place where petrol is stored, then if the place explodes, then it will affect hundreds of people living in the surrounding area. So usually these are vulnerable areas, so protection is needed in areas where hazardous material are stored. Then we'll see the impact of chemical disasters. So we have seen how they have to be stored, who all can make errors and cause accidents. Let us see, if there is a chemical disaster, what is the impact. One thing is the loss of life, people can die. The next thing is it can also cause damage to the animals living in the area, plants living in the area, the environment. Usually when chemicals are leaked, for example, if they are transporting oil by ship, and if the ship has an accident and the oil leaks, then all the fish and other animals living in the sea, they'll die, birds will die. So these are environmental problems, and it can also lead to loss to the industry. Then chemical accidents may be categorized as based on the number of deaths. Number of casualties means number of people who died. Then based on the injury and damage to the property. So based on that, we can categorize as small accident or a big accident or a moderate accident. One example of an impact of chemical disaster is the Bhopal gas tragedy. This happened in December 1984. So in Bhopal, which is a city in North India, suddenly people, when they woke up, they started dying. They started falling down and dying because there was a gas leakage. The gas is methyl isocyanate, it's like cyanide. So it was leaking in the city. The whole city, people started dying, and there many people died, and they had serious health problems for a long time. Even today, if you go to that city, you will find those who are affected, their children get cancer, they get cancer. So these are serious problems which can happen when you are exposed to such chemicals. So how do we manage the hazardous chemical disasters? How can we prevent it? How can we overcome it? First thing is the education and training. There are four ways in which you can educate, and there are 5 ways in which you can provide training. So the first 4 ways in which you can educate are having exhibitions and demonstrations in schools and colleges, and even in the place where they have the chemical, they can provide exhibitions on how to be safe. Then educational programs are conducted in various languages and various locations, and the disaster related manuals and pamphlets are published and distributed to the people. Then using electronic media, if you know, you see in the TV that regularly they advertise saying take care for corona, take care of not smoking. So all these are through the electronic media. Same way regarding chemical hazards, we can have electronic media to educate people. Then disaster related education material can be provided. So what to do when there is a disaster, this information can be passed on to all the people. Other than education, adequate training needs to be given. For example, even in Karigiri, we not only teach, but we also ensure that you go to the clinical area and learn. So that is training. So special training for all the people who are working in the chemical industry. Also people, like for example, if Bhopal has a gas leak, then the fire personnel, that is people working in the fire department, they should know how to rescue the people. Police should know, and the medical hospital should be ready for any emergency. All the community leaders should know that what to do when there is an emergency. So they are all given training. Then retraining, that is once they give training, they should not forget, and after 10-15 years they should not give training. This training should happen every year, then only there will be proper knowledge and they will know what to do. Then the existing other institutes should also do risk assessment, that is what are the risks which are there, what can happen. Then people who are trained can be certified, and safety audits, that is to prevent and we saw in this place technical errors, human errors, lack of information. To prevent all this, we will have safety audits. So that is, audit is done so that people will be able to know where the risk is and how to overcome the risk. And then emergency planning is done. Finally, orientation course for all the people in the medical hospitals and industries are provided, so that when there is a chemical risk, what treatment should be given, how it should be given, all that the medical people should know. And other than this, there are mock exercises, that is on-site and off-site emergency drills, that is without an accident they will act as if there is an accident, and how they will have a drill. So what all the departments will work together to evacuate the people and ensure safety. So this, when the drill is done, it means when it really happens, it will be easy for them to follow the procedure. For example, in Western countries, in UK, US and all, every now and then they have fire drills. Even in schools and colleges, they'll suddenly ring the bell and all the people will go out and stand in line. So that is to prevent loss of life in case of an emergency. Then creation of appropriate infrastructure. So we are seeing management of hazardous chemical disasters. So how do we manage it? First is education and training. We saw a few points. Next is creation of appropriate infrastructure. Infrastructure means on the site, that is the buildings, the road, and personal protective equipment, all the other equipment which is inside the building, especially the fire equipment, all this should be proper. For example, whenever there is a building being constructed for chemical plants, they should have big exits so that a lot of people can escape from the area very quickly. And not only that, around the area, that is if there is a big chemical company, then there should be good roads around the area so that the people can escape from that area quickly through vehicles. And it should not have huge traffic, otherwise people will get stuck there. And there should also be less population. If you see all the gas agencies which are in Vellore and all over the country, you will see that they are outside the town. Very few gas companies are inside the town. Even if they have an office, they will have their godown outside the town. So that is to minimize population around the industrial area. Same way, there will be leak proof, that is spill proof, that is all the vehicles, train or lorries which carry these chemicals, they will have methods of preventing the spill and leak of these chemicals. Then there should be good broadcasting, law and order, that is the police, fire rescue, all these people should be around the area. And medical capabilities, that is there should be a good hospital, and the hospital should have good doctors who know what to do in case there is a chemical emergency. Finally, just like the nuclear disaster, there should be communication set up between the company which is handling the hazardous material and all the local public offices, so that in case there is an accident, immediately people are informed. Finally, there should be ambulance service on the highways, so that in case any accident happens, people are immediately taken through these ambulances. Then medical preparedness, we already saw, there should be enough hospitals, and people should be provided immediate first aid, and then they should be referred to the nearest bigger hospital in case they are very sick. And even those who are not affected but who are exposed to the chemicals should be given adequate medical care. So the medical people should be prepared all the time. The emergency departments in the medical hospital should be prepared all the time. Not only that, the local people, the district people, the state and central and NGOs, all these agencies should also be ready for any disaster due to chemical leakage, or in fact any other disaster, all the time. Then if there is any disaster, then the next step is the response, relief and rehabilitation. So response is what they do immediately after that. So there should be dedicated people who are involved in the response of disasters, and it should be done at the national level, state level, district level, and NGOs should be involved. So they provide relief, that is they evacuate the people, they give food for them, they give shelter for them at the immediate time after the accident, or immediate time after the chemical hazardous material has leaked. And after the immediate few days or few hours are over, then they will reassess the situation. If the situation is contained, then the people who are not affected will be allowed to go back to their houses, and those who are already exposed and are sick, they will be provided rehabilitation by giving compensation. They will be given other things to overcome this tragedy. So most of the people who get exposed to all these chemicals, what they will have is psychosocial trauma, and they'll also have something called as post-traumatic stress disorder. So the psychosocial trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder and all, we will see later when we cover the psychological and social dimensions following disasters. So these are the various aspects of chemical disasters. There are still two more topics. One is food poisoning and the other is air, rail and train accidents, which we will see in the next class. Thank you.